I accidentally walked into a room full of alien princesses, and now they won't let me leave. Leonardo had attended precisely 3 formal diplomatic functions in his life, and he'd managed to embarrass himself at every single one. The first time, he'd knocked over a Centaurian ice sculpture that turned out to be the guest of honor's grandfather in cryostasis. The second time, he'd complimented what he thought was an elaborate costume, only to learn it was the ambassador's actual exoskeleton. Tonight's disaster involved mistaking the Valerian delegate's prehensile face tendrils for a decorative sash and complimenting their bold fashion choice with entirely too much enthusiasm. The banquet hall of the Caesarian palace stretched 3 stories high, its walls constructed from living crystal that hummed softly and shifted through spectral colors based on the emotional tenor of nearby conversations. Right now, the section near Leonardo pulsed an embarrassed shade of crimson that perfectly matched his face. He'd excused himself with a mumbled apology about needing air, but what he really needed was a bathroom. The Caesarian wine, served in floating globules that you had to catch with your mouth, had been flowing freely for hours, and his human bladder hadn't evolved for diplomatic endurance. The problem was that the palace seemed designed by someone who thought architecture should be an adventure sport. Corridors branched and curved like neural pathways, each one lined with doors that looked identical, except for symbols he couldn't read. The translator chip embedded behind his ear could handle 17,000 languages, but apparently Caesarian interior signage wasn't among them. He'd been wandering for 10 minutes, his situation growing more urgent with each passing moment. He tried opening doors at random. The first revealed a room where small creatures that looked like floating jellyfish performed what might have been opera. The second opened onto a balcony overlooking a garden where the plants appeared to be engaged in conversation, their leaves rustling in complex patterns. The third door led to a hallway that seemed to curve upward at an angle that made his inner ear protest. Leonardo's internal pressure had reached critical levels when he spotted an ornate door at the end of a side passage. It was larger than the others, decorated with intricate patterns that swirled across its surface like oil on water. More importantly, it was isolated, which suggested privacy. He didn't care if it was a bathroom, a closet, or a meditation chamber. Any port in a storm. He pushed it open and stepped inside, already halfway through his sigh of relief when his brain caught up with what his eyes were seeing. The chamber was circular, perhaps 30 feet across, with walls that emitted a soft, warm light from no discernible source. Silk cushions in jewel tones floated at various heights throughout the space, defying gravity with the casual ease of advanced technology. And occupying those cushions were 7 women, each one stunning enough to make his brain temporarily forget its previous emergency. Their skin ranged across a spectrum he'd never seen on humans. Deep sapphire blue, rich violet, pale gold that seemed to generate its own subtle luminescence, soft rose quartz pink. But their faces were unmistakably humanoid, beautiful in that particular way that made his mouth go dry, with one striking exception. Their ears rose to elegant points, long and delicately tapered, sweeping back from their heads like something from ancient Earth mythology. Every single one of them was staring at him. The conversation that had filled the room moments before died instantly. One woman had been gesturing animatedly, her hands frozen mid-motion. Another had been reclining with her eyes closed, now sitting bolt upright. A third had been doing something with a holographic display that now hung forgotten in the air, its blue light casting strange shadows across her violet features. Leonardo's mind raced through possible responses. Apologize? Back out slowly? Pretend he was a hologram? Before he could settle on any strategy, he heard a sound behind him that made his stomach drop. The soft, final hiss of a door sealing shut. He spun around. Where the ornate door had been, there was now only smooth wall, its surface rippling gently like disturbed water before settling into solidity. He pressed his hand against it experimentally. It felt like touching warm glass. "Well," said a voice behind him, musical and amused, "this is unexpected." Leonardo turned back slowly. The woman with sapphire skin had risen from her cushion and was approaching him with a smile that managed to be both welcoming and slightly predatory. Her eyes sparkled with something that looked dangerously like mischief. "I am so sorry," Leonardo stammered, his translator chip working overtime. I was looking for the bathroom, and I got completely lost. And this palace is like a labyrinth designed by someone who hated straight lines, and I didn't mean to intrude. He glanced back at the sealed wall. Why won't the door open? The sapphire woman's smile widened. Because, human, you've just entered the selection chamber. She gestured elegantly at the room and her companions. And by ancient tradition, you cannot leave until you've chosen. Leonardo's bladder chose that exact moment to remind him of his original mission, sending a sharp protest through his nervous system. He pressed his hand more firmly against the sealed wall, as if willpower alone might convince it to open. The surface remained stubbornly solid, warm and unyielding beneath his palm. Chosen? He managed, his voice climbing half an octave. Chosen what? A favorite color? A menu item? Please tell me it's something simple like picking which of these floating cushions looks most comfortable, because honestly, they all look amazing, and I really need to... A bride, the sapphire woman said, her smile never wavering. You've entered the chamber where suitors traditionally come to select a wife from among the daughters of the royal house. For a moment, Leonardo's brain simply refused to process the words. They bounced around his skull like error messages in a corrupted system. Behind the sapphire woman, the other 6 had risen from their cushions, forming a loose semicircle. Their expressions ranged from curious to amused to openly skeptical. One of them, with skin the color of pale gold, had her arms crossed and was looking at him the way someone might examine a particularly unimpressive vegetable. But I'm not a suitor, Leonardo protested. I'm a junior attaché from Earth's diplomatic corps. I'm here to take notes and not touch anything important. I don't even know your names. I can't marry someone whose name I don't know. That's got to be against some kind of regulation, right? My name is Mila, the sapphire woman said, executing a small bow that seemed more theatrical than formal. And these are my sisters. She gestured to each in turn. Kira, Zara, Nevia, Celine, Thora, and Jessa. Leonardo tried to match names to faces, but his brain was too busy spiraling through the absurdity of his situation. Look, this is clearly a misunderstanding. I'm not supposed to be here. The door must have malfunctioned. If you could just override the security protocol, or call maintenance, or... The door didn't malfunction, said the one Mila had identified as Kira. Her violet skin seemed to darken slightly, like storm clouds gathering. The palace AI is extremely strict about tradition. Once someone crosses the threshold of the selection chamber, the ritual begins. The seal won't release until a choice is made. That's insane, Leonardo said. What if I'd been a delivery person? What if I'd been looking for a bathroom, which for the record I absolutely was and still am? The AI doesn't care about context, said Nevia, the pale gold one who'd been examining him critically. It only cares about rules. Someone enters the chamber seals, the selection begins. It's been working this way for 6,000 years. 6,000 years and nobody thought to add a wrong room button? Zara laughed at that, a sound like wind chimes. She moved her hand through the air, and the holographic display she'd been working with earlier materialized between them. Alien script scrolled across its glowing surface. I've been trying to find a loophole for the past 3 days, she said. The code is airtight. Whoever designed this system really committed to the whole sacred tradition thing. 3 days? Leonardo's eyes widened. You've been locked in here for 3 days? Waiting for the proper suitor our parents approved, Mila said, making air quotes with her fingers in a gesture that seemed hilariously human. A dignitary from the Helion system, extremely pompous, collects rare crystals and won't stop talking about his collection. We've been dreading his arrival. So when you burst through that door looking like you'd seen a ghost, said Selene, whose rose quartz skin caught the light beautifully. It was honestly the most interesting thing that's happened all week. Leonardo ran his hand through his hair, trying to think past the physical urgency that was making it hard to focus. Okay, so let me understand this. You've been stuck here waiting for some crystal-obsessed dignitary to show up and go through this selection ritual, and I've accidentally triggered it instead by stumbling in here looking for a bathroom. Is that about right? That's exactly right, Mila said. And there's no way to just explain to the AI that this is a mistake? Already tried, Zara said, manipulating her holographic display. I told it you were a cleaning service malfunction. It asked me to rephrase in the form of a selection. I tried telling it you were a holographic projection, added Thora, who had deep blue skin that reminded Leonardo of Earth's oceans. It ran a bioscan and determined you were regrettably solid. Regrettably? Leonardo asked. Its word, not mine, Thora said with a shrug. Leonardo walked to the center of the chamber, putting some distance between himself and the sealed door. The floating cushions drifted gently in response to his movement, their surfaces shimmering. This is completely ridiculous. I'm going to be reported as missing. People will come looking for me. Someone will notice I've been gone for hours. Will they, though? Jessa spoke for the first time, her silvery skin almost luminescent. Have you noticed how chaotic these diplomatic functions are? Half the delegates have been wandering the palace drunk on Caesarian wine. Your absence probably won't register until morning. She had a point, Leonardo realized with sinking dread. Ambassador Chen had already lost track of 2 staff members in the garden maze. They'd been found 4 hours later, still arguing about which direction was north. Leonardo sank onto one of the floating cushions, which adjusted its height automatically to support him at the perfect angle. Even in crisis, he had to admit the Caesarian furniture was exceptional. The cushion seemed to sense his stress and began emitting a subtle warmth that would have been soothing under literally any other circumstances. All right, he said, accepting the inevitable. If we're all stuck here until this ritual is completed, I might as well know who I'm stuck with. Tell me about yourselves. And please, someone tell me there's a bathroom somewhere in this chamber, because I'm about 10 minutes from a diplomatic incident of the worst possible kind. Mila laughed and waved her hand at the far wall. A section shimmered and reconfigured itself, revealing a small alcove. Through there, the palace does provide basic amenities, even for sacred rituals. Leonardo practically sprinted to the alcove, his dignity abandoned somewhere around the moment he'd mistaken tentacles for fashion. When he emerged several minutes later, considerably more comfortable and able to think clearly, he found the 7 sisters had arranged their cushions in a loose circle, leaving a space open for him. Better? Mila asked, barely suppressing a grin. Immeasurably, Leonardo admitted, settling back onto his cushion. Now I can focus on the absurdity of this situation with my full attention. Kira leaned forward, her violet skin shifting through darker shades like a mood ring. You really didn't know what the selection chamber was? They didn't brief you about palace protocols? My briefing consisted of, don't touch anything, don't insult anyone, and try not to cause an interstellar incident, Leonardo said. I've already failed on all 3 counts, and it's not even midnight. What were you doing at the banquet anyway? Nevia asked. Her skeptical expression had softened slightly, though she still looked like she was waiting for him to prove himself competent at something. Taking notes on the trade negotiations. Very boring stuff about mineral rights and shipping routes. I'm supposed to write a report that nobody will read. Leonardo paused. I also spent 20 minutes complimenting Ambassador Velcor's face tendrils, thinking they were decorative. The chamber erupted in laughter. Even Nevia cracked a smile. You didn't, Selin said, her hand covering her mouth. I told him they were a bold fashion statement and that I admired his commitment to accessorizing. Zara was laughing so hard she had to dismiss her holographic display before she accidentally scrambled its code. What did he say? He informed me very politely that they were sensory organs connected directly to his neural cortex and that I'd essentially been complimenting his exposed nerve endings. I like you, Mila declared. You're terrible at diplomacy, but in an endearing way. It's a gift, Leonardo said dryly. So what about all of you? What do 7 royal daughters do when they're not locked in selection chambers? Kira brightened immediately. I pilot spacecraft, experimental ones mostly. Last month I tested a fighter that could fold through subspace without using jump gates. It worked perfectly for 6 seconds. Then I materialized inside a cargo freighter. Nobody was hurt, but the captain is still filing complaints. You materialized inside another ship? Through another ship, technically. Passed right through their hull. The look on the crew's face when I waved at them from their cargo bay was priceless. Thora shook her head in mock disapproval. She's been grounded 4 times this year alone. Our parents keep threatening to revoke her pilot's license. They won't, Kira said confidently. I'm the only one who can successfully navigate the Tethys corridor without triggering the defense satellites. Zara manipulated the air with her fingers, and her holographic display reappeared, now showing a complex three-dimensional star map. I work with the Palace information systems. Every hologram, every AI interface, every environmental control, I can access all of it. She grinned mischievously. Which is how I know that the dignitary our parents selected for us has already arrived at the palace. He's currently in the East Wing, boring 3 different servants with detailed descriptions of his crystal collection. How detailed are we talking? Leonardo asked. He's been speaking for 45 minutes about the refractive properties of a single specimen. Leonardo winced. My condolences. We've been trying to delay his arrival at this chamber, Nevia said. Zara keeps routing him to wrong floors. Yesterday, she convinced the palace AI to tell him the selection chamber was being fumigated. Did he believe it? He asked what kind of parasites might infest a sealed ceremonial space. Then he launched into a story about crystal-boring insects from his home world. I'm starting to understand why you've all been hiding in here for 3 days. Selene, who'd been quiet, spoke up. We're not hiding. We're strategically avoiding an unwanted arranged marriage by using our own tradition against our parents. If we stay in this chamber long enough, eventually they'll have to acknowledge that the ritual isn't working and call it off. How long is long enough? Traditional courtship periods range from 1 week to 6 months, depending on historical precedent, Thora said. We were hoping for at least 2 weeks. And then I showed up and accidentally activated the whole thing, Leonardo said. Technically, yes, Mila admitted. But we're choosing to see this as an opportunity rather than a disaster. An opportunity for what? The 7 sisters exchanged glances, and Leonardo realized they were communicating something wordlessly. Finally, Mila turned back to him with that dangerous smile he was beginning to recognize. An opportunity, she said slowly, to get creative with our interpretation of ancient tradition. Leonardo felt a prickle of apprehension run down his spine. In his limited diplomatic experience, whenever someone mentioned getting creative with traditions, disaster usually followed. He'd once watched a Centaurian delegate get creative with seating arrangements and accidentally start a minor war over dessert placement. I'm not sure I like the sound of that, he said carefully. Mila's smile widened. It's simple, really. The ritual requires you to make a selection, yes? But here's the thing. None of us actually want to marry that crystal-obsessed dignitary. We've been trying to find a way out of this arrangement for months. And our parents are extremely stubborn, Kira added, her skin darkening to a frustrated purple. They believe this alliance with the Helian system is crucial for trade relations. They've dismissed every objection we've raised. So you want me to select one of you, Leonardo said slowly. And then what? We all just walk out and pretend this never happened? Not exactly, Zara said, her fingers dancing through holographic code. According to the ritual protocols, once a selection is made, the chamber unseals. The chosen bride then has the right to accept or reject the proposal in a formal ceremony that happens later. Much later, Nevia emphasized, usually 3 to 6 months later, depending on how long the negotiations take. Leonardo was beginning to see their angle. So if I select one of you, you get out of this chamber, you're technically engaged to me instead of the dignitary, and then in a few months you can formally reject my proposal, and the whole thing falls apart. Leaving us free to choose our own paths, Selene said quietly, without our parents being able to force another arrangement. The tradition is very specific. Once a selection ritual is completed, it cannot be repeated for the same person for at least 5 years. That's actually kind of brilliant, Leonardo admitted, except for one problem. Which one of you am I supposed to choose? I've known you for maybe 30 minutes. I can barely remember all your names. The sisters looked at each other again, and this time Leonardo noticed the way their pointed ears twitched slightly when they were thinking hard. It was oddly endearing. We could draw lots, Thora suggested. That seems too random, Jessa countered. What if it ends up being someone who doesn't want to go through with it? We all want to go through with it, Kira said. That's the whole point. Yes, but some of us have more to lose than others, Nevia pointed out. Kira, you've got your pilot trials coming up. If you're engaged, even temporarily, they might postpone them. And Zara's been working on that AI integration project, Selene added. A formal engagement would mean state functions, public appearances. It would eat up all her time. Leonardo watched them debate, struck by the casual way they considered each other's needs. They'd clearly been locked in this chamber together for days, but instead of being at each other's throats, they were trying to protect one another. "What about you?" he asked Mila. "What do you have to lose?" She tilted her head, considering. "I'm supposed to be leading a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies next month, but honestly, I'm better at navigating politics than most of my sisters. I could handle the engagement performance without it disrupting my work too much." "Performance," Leonardo repeated. "Is that what this would be?" "Of course," Mila said. "We'd have to make it convincing enough that our parents accept it. Public appearances, perhaps a few carefully staged romantic moments. Nothing too elaborate." "I'm a terrible actor," Leonardo warned. "I once had to pretend to enjoy Rogelian opera, and I lasted exactly 4 minutes before my face gave me away." "Rogelian opera is objectively terrible," Kira said. "Nobody can pretend to enjoy it. They just pretend to pretend." Zara manipulated her display, pulling up what looked like scheduling matrices. "If we're going to do this, we need to decide quickly." The dignitary's getting suspicious about the fumigation story. He started asking the palace AI about decontamination protocols. "How long before he figures out there was never any fumigation?" Leonardo asked. "Maybe an hour. I've been feeding him increasingly technical jargon, but he's more persistent than I anticipated." Leonardo stood up from his cushion and paced the chamber, trying to think. The walls pulsed with gentle light, responding to the nervous energy in the room. "Let me make sure I understand. If I select one of you, let's say Mila since she volunteered, the door unseals, we're technically engaged, and then in a few months she can reject the proposal. That gets all of you out of the arranged marriage situation and buys you 5 years of freedom." "Exactly," Mila confirmed. "And what happens to me? Do I just go back to Earth and explain to my superiors that I accidentally got engaged to an alien princess while looking for a bathroom?" "You'd be a hero," Kira said cheerfully. "You'd have the best dinner party story in human history." "I'd be fired," Leonardo corrected. "Possibly launched into the sun. My job is to be forgettable and cause 0 problems." "Too late for that," Nevia said, but there was warmth in her voice now. Leonardo stopped pacing and looked at the 7 of them. They were watching him with a mixture of hope and anxiety, their pointed ears angled forward in what he was learning to recognize as anticipation. He thought about the crystal-obsessed dignitary boring servants in the East Wing. He thought about these 7 intelligent, capable women being forced into a marriage none of them wanted. Leonardo's mind raced through the implications, weighing diplomatic disasters against basic human decency. Then something occurred to him, an idea so absurd that it might actually work precisely because of its absurdity. "What if I don't choose just one of you?" he said slowly. The chamber went silent. 7 pairs of eyes fixed on him, with expressions ranging from confusion to intrigue. "What do you mean?" Mila asked. "The ritual says I have to choose, right? But does it specifically say I can only choose one person?" Leonardo felt his pulse quicken as the idea took shape. "What if I formally select all 7 of you?" Zara's fingers froze mid-gesture in her holographic display. "That's not how the tradition works." "But does the tradition explicitly forbid it?" Leonardo pressed. "You said the palace AI is strict about following the rules. If there's no rule against multiple selection, then it can't reject it." Kira's skin flickered through several shades of violet as she processed this. "That's either brilliant or completely insane." "Possibly both," Leonardo admitted. "But think about it. The AI can't complete the ritual if I violate the parameters, but it also can't reject my choice if the choice is technically valid. It would create a logical paradox." Nevia leaned forward, her skepticism giving way to reluctant admiration. "You're suggesting we break the system by following its own rules too literally." "Exactly. It's like when I accidentally crashed the embassy's coffee machine by asking it to make decaf espresso. The machine spent 3 hours trying to reconcile the contradiction before someone unplugged it." Thora laughed. "You killed a coffee machine with a paradox?" "In my defense, I just arrived on station, and I was very jet-lagged. Or jump-lagged. Whatever the space equivalent is." Zara was already working, her fingers flying through screens of code. The holographic display fragmented into dozens of smaller windows, each one filled with dense alien script. The original protocol was written 6,000 years ago in Old Caesarian. The word they use for selection is kathara, which technically refers to the act of choosing, not the number of choices. So grammatically, choosing 7 people is still kathara? Selene asked. Grammatically, choosing 7 people, 700 people, or 7,000 people would all qualify as kathara. The number isn't specified in the root protocol. Mila started to smile, that dangerous gleam returning to her eyes. This could actually work. It would definitely crash the AI, Zara said, pulling up more code. The system is designed to process a single selection and generate the appropriate ceremonial documentation. If Leonardo declares multiple selections, the AI will try to generate documentation for each one simultaneously. While also trying to maintain the rule that only one selection can be made, Jessa added, catching on, it would be trying to execute contradictory instructions. How long would it take to crash? Leonardo asked. Zara tilted her head, calculating. Given the processing power of the palace AI and the complexity of the ritual protocols, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 3 minutes. It depends on how many recursive loops it gets caught in before the safety systems kick in. And when it crashes, the door opens? The door has to open, Zara confirmed. It's a safety feature. If the AI controlling the environmental systems goes offline, all sealed chambers automatically unseal to prevent anyone from getting trapped. Kira stood up, her cushion bobbing gently in her absence. We need to do this before the dignitary gets here. Once he enters the chamber, he becomes part of the ritual and this whole plan falls apart. How much time do we have? Mila asked. Zara checked her display. He's finished boring the servants about crystal refractive properties and is now asking for directions to the selection chamber. I can probably delay him for another 10 minutes, maximum. Then we do it now, Leonardo said, feeling a strange rush of adrenaline. This was either the cleverest diplomatic maneuver he'd ever witnessed or the stupidest thing he'd ever participated in. Given his track record, it was probably both. Wait, Nevia said. We need to make this convincing. The AI monitors vocal patterns for sincerity during selection declarations. If Leonardo just rattles off our names like a grocery list, it might flag the attempt as fraudulent. How do I make choosing 7 strangers sound sincere? Leonardo asked. Tell us why, Selene said quietly. Not why you're choosing us specifically, but why you're willing to help us at all. The AI can't detect emotional authenticity, but it can detect conviction. Leonardo looked at each of them in turn. These 7 women he'd met less than an hour ago in the most absurd circumstances imaginable. Because, he said, I've spent my entire career watching powerful people make decisions for others without asking what they want. I've sat in meetings where delegates traded colonies like playing cards and discussed populations like statistics. And maybe I can't change any of that, but I can help 7 people choose their own futures instead of having them chosen by someone who collects crystals. The chamber's walls pulsed with a warm golden light. That'll do, Mila said softly. Leonardo stepped into the center of the chamber, his heart hammering against his ribs. The 7 sisters formed a circle around him, their pointed ears angled forward in anticipation. Zara kept one hand in her holographic display, monitoring the dignitary's progress through the palace corridors. 8 minutes, she whispered. Leonardo took a breath and addressed the air, trusting that the palace AI was listening. I, Leonardo of Earth, hereby make my formal selection in accordance with the ancient traditions of the Caesarian royal house. He paused, gathering his conviction. I choose Mila. I choose Kira. I choose Zara, Nevia, Selene, Thora, and Jessa. I choose all 7 daughters because they deserve the freedom to choose their own paths, and I refuse to participate in a system that treats people like diplomatic currency. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The chamber remained sealed, its walls pulsing with their gentle light. Then a sound emerged from everywhere and nowhere at once, a low hum that rapidly climbed in pitch. The holographic displays around Zara began multiplying uncontrollably, each one trying to generate ceremonial documentation while simultaneously preventing the others from doing the same. It's working, Zara breathed, her eyes wide. The AI is caught in a processing loop. It's trying to execute the selection protocol 7 times simultaneously while also maintaining the single selection parameter. The humming intensified. Small sparks began appearing along the walls where the bioluminescent crystals interfaced with the palace's computer systems. One of the floating cushions dropped suddenly to the floor, its anti-gravity field cutting out. "Is it supposed to be sparking?" Leonardo asked nervously. "Absolutely not," Kira said, but she was grinning. The door began to shimmer, its solid surface rippling like disturbed water. Then it flickered. Solid, transparent, solid again, as the AI struggled to determine whether the ritual was complete or invalid. 5 minutes until the dignitary arrives, Zara reported, though her voice was barely audible over the increasingly frantic humming. Mila grabbed Leonardo's hand. "Whatever happens, thank you for trying." "Thank me when we're out of here," Leonardo said. The chamber's walls cycled through colors rapidly now. Red, blue, gold, green, reflecting the AI's cascading system failures. More cushions fell. The holographic displays shattered into fragments of code that hung in the air like digital snow. Then, with a sound like reality hiccuping, everything stopped. The humming cut off abruptly. The door dissolved into nothing, revealing the corridor beyond. And from hidden speakers throughout the chamber, a synthetic voice announced in perfect diplomatic monotone, "Critical error in ritual protocols. Chamber systems rebooting. All occupants please exit for safety inspection." They didn't need to be told twice. The 8 of them bolted through the opening, Leonardo half expecting the door to seal again at any moment. They spilled into the corridor in a tangle of limbs and laughter, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape. "We did it," Jessa gasped. "We actually did it." "The AI crashed," Zara said, checking a small device she'd pulled from her sleeve. "The entire ritual protocol system is offline. It'll take hours to restore, and when it does, there won't be any record of what happened in there." The paradox corrupted the event logs. "What about the dignitary?" Selin asked. As if summoned by her words, a figure rounded the corner at the far end of the corridor. He was tall, elaborately dressed, and carrying what appeared to be a small crystal specimen in a protective case. His expression suggested someone who had spent considerable time perfecting his diplomatic smile and was now deploying it at maximum intensity. "Ah," he said, his voice resonating with practiced charm. "I was told I might find the selection chamber in this direction. I am Helric of the Helion system, here to—" He stopped, noticing the 8 of them clustered in the hallway. "Is the chamber closed for fumigation?" "Fumigation's complete," Mila said smoothly, stepping forward with the kind of royal authority Leonardo suspected she'd been suppressing for days. "Unfortunately, there was a significant structural issue discovered during the process. The chamber is being decommissioned indefinitely." Helric's smile faltered. "Decommissioned? But the selection ritual will need to be postponed," Mila continued. "Possibly for several years, pending renovations. I'm sure you understand. Safety protocols must be observed." Leonardo watched in admiration as she completely dismantled the man's expectations, without giving him anything to argue against. The other sisters stood behind her in silent support, a unified front. Helric looked between them, his diplomatic smile now fighting a losing battle against confusion. "Perhaps I should speak with your parents about alternative arrangements." "That won't be necessary," Nevia cut in, her voice crisp. "We've already sent them a full report on the situation. I'm sure they'll contact you if they wish to pursue discussions further." Which was, Leonardo knew from his diplomatic training, a polite way of saying, "Please leave and never bring this up again." Helric seemed to deflate slightly, his crystal specimen suddenly looking less impressive. "I see. Well, I suppose I should return to my quarters then." He executed a formal bow that somehow managed to convey both politeness and disappointment, then retreated back down the corridor with considerably less enthusiasm than he'd arrived with. They waited until his footsteps faded completely before exploding into barely suppressed laughter. "I can't believe that worked," Thora said, leaning against the wall for support. "I can't believe you crashed a 6,000-year-old AI with a logical paradox," Kira added, clapping Leonardo on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. "I can't believe I'm not fired yet," Leonardo said. "Give it time, though. The night is young." Mila turned to him, her expression suddenly serious despite the smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You realize you're technically engaged to all 7 of us now, right? Even without the AI records, we all witnessed your declaration. Leonardo felt his stomach drop. Wait, what? But the AI crashed. The ritual wasn't completed. The AI crashed, Zara interrupted, but the declaration was still made in the presence of royal witnesses. Technically, by our customs, that makes it binding until formally dissolved, which will take approximately 6 months of bureaucratic processing, Selene added helpfully. Leonardo stared at them in horror, then noticed the way their ears were twitching with barely contained amusement. You're messing with me. Completely, Mila admitted, and they all burst out laughing again. They walked together through the palace corridors, no longer a desperate group of trapped prisoners, but something closer to conspirators who just pulled off an impossible heist. Leonardo found himself describing his earlier mishaps at the banquet, and they countered with stories of their own diplomatic disasters. Apparently, Kira had once accidentally engaged a warship's weapon systems during a peaceful demonstration flight. Nevia had translated a treaty incorrectly and nearly ceded mining rights to a planet that didn't exist. By the time they reached the gardens, where the banquet had dissolved into informal groups scattered among the bioluminescent plants, Leonardo felt like he'd known them for years instead of hours. They found a quiet corner where the plants hummed with soft light and settled onto benches that adjusted to their weight. So what happens now? Leonardo asked. Your parents will eventually realize the selection ritual failed. They will, Mila agreed. But by then, we'll have had time to present alternative arguments. Individually, we're easy to dismiss. Together, we're much harder to ignore. Plus, Zara added, I may have accidentally corrupted some of their communication logs with the Helion system. They'll spend weeks trying to reconstruct negotiations that never quite happened the way they remember. You're terrifying, Leonardo said with genuine admiration. Thank you, Zara replied cheerfully. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching other delegates drift through the gardens. Leonardo spotted Ambassador Chen gesticulating wildly at a group of Centaurians, probably telling another embellished story. He should probably report back, file some kind of incident report, start the process of explaining how he'd spent several hours locked in a room with 7 alien princesses. You should visit again, Selene said quietly. Officially, I mean. Earth and Caesarea are discussing cultural exchange programs. I'm not sure they'd send me back after tonight, Leonardo said. Then we'll request you specifically, Mila said. We need more diplomats who understand that sometimes the best way to honor tradition is to break it creatively. Kira pulled something from a hidden pocket in her dress, a small device that glowed with inner light. Communications chip, direct line to all of us, bypasses official channels. In case you ever need to crash another ancient AI, or just want to talk to people who appreciate your particular brand of chaos. Leonardo took the device, turning it over in his hands. It was warm, humming with the same energy as the palace walls. I caused an interstellar incident, didn't I? The best kind, Thora assured him. The kind that nobody can quite explain in official reports. As Leonardo finally made his way back toward the diplomatic quarters, the communications chip secure in his pocket, he realized something had shifted in him. He'd spent his entire career trying to be invisible, to avoid making waves, to never be the story. Tonight he'd stumbled into the middle of someone else's story and somehow helped write a better ending. He'd probably still get fired, but at least he'd have an incredible explanation for why. The end. We've reached the end of another story. Sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones we never plan. Moments when the universe puts us in exactly the wrong place at exactly the right time, and we're forced to decide who we're going to be when no one's watching. If you enjoyed this tale of diplomatic disasters and creative rebellion, don't forget to subscribe to Sci-Fi Pulse for more stories from across the galaxy. If you choose chaos over harmony, hit the like button, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story in the comments. And stay tuned. Our next story is coming soon,